Hi, I'm Adam Forbes. I'm the author of Corporate Escapology and the host of the Corporate Escapology podcast. Corporate Escapology is all about helping people prepare to leave corporate life by packaging up the amazing skills, experience, and know-how that they've acquired and gained through their corporate careers and turning them into something that could build an amazing life for them, something more purposeful, more rewarding, more fulfilling, maybe more enjoyable. The podcast is trying to shine a light on people that have already trodden this path. So the people that have left their corporate jobs and gone on to do something quite different from what they were doing in their corporate jobs, but only because of those skills and experiences and networks and other things that they gained through those jobs. So today we're going to meet Steve Cook. Steve spent 25 years working for one company, so he's very much a lifer, but actually he chose not to make his whole life working for one company. He's got a background in strategy, commercialization, innovation, and as we'll hear, he's used, these have been threads throughout all of his career within BP. But he's chosen to leave and become a potter, or at least dedicate quite a lot of his time to become a creative potter. His style is Scandinavian and Japanese, so you could say Japandi. He doesn't like that phrase. You can find his work on Instagram at Steve Cook with a V with 2 underscores following it. Absolutely beautiful stuff. In fact, I have an example here. But I'm going to let Steve tell his story and we can all learn from what he's done and what he's doing now. And hopefully that will inspire you and build some confidence that you might be ready to move to. Hi. Welcome, Steve. Very happy to talk to you this morning, this Friday morning. You are my first ever guest on Corporate Escapology, the podcast. So I am very keen to hear your story and share your story with other people. As you know, I'm really keen to try to expose the journeys that other people have been on since they've left their corporate jobs and how they're using those skills and experiences to build new careers for themselves. So give us a little potted history of your journey. Like, why did you even start thinking about a career in a corporate job in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's obviously an honor and a privilege to be the first person to do this. So, and great to talk to you, as usual. I mean, where to start? I did a PhD in chemistry at university, and I guess I was playing for time in some ways and sort of trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. And I think it was a lack of imagination in some ways, really, that I ended up in a corporate job, which was a result of, it was easy to take part in the sort of university milk round process, talking to people that way. And I didn't even know whether I wanted to keep being a scientist, or I interviewed for marketing jobs with breweries and all sorts of stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think that process of matchmaking through meeting people on the milk round was kind of useful, because it helped me to understand, I think, where a cultural fit might be. And so when I met folks from, it was BP Chemicals that I joined back in 1998 when I started my corporate career. And I met the folks from that team at one of the events that they did at the university. And I sort of immediately felt that it's a team of people I could work with, get on with, shared some kind of philosophy with. So I guess for all those reasons, I ended up joining BP and going to work up in Hull, a manufacturing site. So it wasn't like a high glamour. At least I was sort of locked away in a concrete bunker making catalysts for petrochemical processes, but it was a lot of fun. But I guess I quickly sort of figured out in that first couple of years that I didn't want to be in a laboratory for the rest of my career. I was never methodical enough or able to concentrate for long enough to be a really good scientist. And but what it did do, because it was quite a small bit of the business relative to the rest of BP, was it allowed me to get access to some of what was going on in the business development side of the business, figuring out what new products might people want, what sort of big trends are going on sort of in the industry that might open up opportunities for new products, new lines of business, new value, if you like. And all the while, that whole business was driven by technology and innovation. And so I think that sort of lit a little bit of a fire or planted a seed for something that I think has been a thread through career, which is sitting at the boundary between technological innovation and new business creation, if you like. And I figured out doing some project work early on in my career that's what really interested me and that I was passionate about. And that thread, like I say, has stayed with me. But then, the benefit of joining a very large company like BP is you can move around the organization into places where, you don't necessarily on paper have the skills immediately to do the job, but you can grow into them. And so that, I guess on paper a little bit, my career looks a bit like a random walk, but it's partly driven by where's the most fun I can have in this organization, and partly driven by an attraction to kind of blank sheets of paper and how do I help start something new that might be, I got very heavily involved in the launch of BP's alternative energy business in 2005. And then again, the company took a risk on me and put me into a very commercial role in that organization where I got to develop, low carbon power projects around the world and learn a ton by doing that. It's probably one of the more fun jobs I've had in the organization because it was literally, there was nothing and we built a whole organization and it was very expansive. And so that was a very fun time for a number of years doing that.
So let's now just take a step back from all of that and just say, I think you've pointed out some of these things, but what do you regard as your big sort of core skills that you think that you took away from you when you left? And when over that 25 years, what you mentioned a couple of sort of threads, but what do you think you got really good at during that time?
It's a really good question, and I think one of the key things I developed was an ability to turn curiosity into action and to sift out the things that have the pattern recognition to sift out the things that probably weren't going to fly. And I think that intuition is only developed over a lot of experience, and it's then a sort of an internal playbook. So there's that. I think there's a comfort with uncertainty that I have, and almost an appetite for it, which for me is where the excitement comes. And I think in the early sort of phases in my career, I wasn't very good at bringing people along with me on that journey. And I think what I got better at towards the end of the corporate phase in my career was the storytelling, the narrative building, and the sort of collective, collaborative work that comes with building the excitement so that you kind of get people to the start line at the same time. So that's probably the second thing. I think thirdly, I've always had an appetite and an interest for the big strategic sort of themes, and the bigger the theme, the bigger the dimensions of the issue, the better. And that's why I like the energy industry, because it sort of is so fundamental, so strategic, so geopolitical. But I think I developed an ability over time to be able to synthesize a lot of complex, different inputs and turn that into something which was easy to communicate, digestible to people. And I think that's quite important in the storytelling of kicking off something new and allowing people to understand it or relate it to things they already get, if you like.
Great. So, okay. So now, you've looked back, you've left. Why did you leave? Why did you think right now is the right time to do something different?
Well, it wasn't totally my choice. I mean, it's probably fair to say that probably the last 18 months of my career were I was very convinced that I wanted to move on and do something else. And, I'd even started talking to headhunters and interviewing a little bit ad hoc, not sort of in a very serious sort of committed way, but certainly psychologically I'd sort of got one foot out the door. And I think for a number of reasons. I think firstly, there's a level of seniority, possibly in any organization, but I only know one, where there's a sort of a transition between being able to enact or really do things on a daily basis versus managing expectations, managing senior office politics, and if you're not careful, that can become the job, and I'm not interested in that at all. And so I don't play that game very well. Others play it much better. And then for me anyway, sitting at that level of seniority and not being able to and not wanting to play those kind of games made it kind of an unpleasant place to be. And that and a combination of that and what I mentioned earlier, which was that I think the company, for a bunch of reasons, had lost interest at that period of time in developing adjacent new value, meant that I couldn't really use the skills that I'd built in a meaningful way. And it sort of felt like the organization didn't know what to do with me anymore, because I had a certain set of skills that it didn't really want or quite need. So I ended up, I think, for the last year or so of my career, doing a job which was okay, but it was sort of not quite a fit for me. And then it starts to, for me anyway, I start getting very impatient with that and thinking, there's an opportunity cost to that for me. I could be learning something and I could be having an impact somewhere else. So that was sort of where my head was at. And I mentioned a couple of times to the exec that I was working for, why don't you just give me a redundancy package? And I was sort of told no. And then sort of out of the blue, there was a reorganization last year, and I got told very, very abruptly, actually, that sort of my time was up, and so it was sort of a surprise, but also, if I thought about it, I could see it coming, and it's sort of what I wanted to happen.
Just saying, you'd done some preparation for that through the interviews and stuff, so you'd started sort of thinking about what you might do next. Although the timing was unexpected, you had actually done some sort of got your head in a space that maybe you wouldn't stay in the company or be there in a year's time or 2 years' time.
Yeah, I certainly think the valuable thing that I did for me was to get my head in that space. The conversations and the interviews we're doing were actually, effectively ruled some things out. It was helpful in that sense, but I wasn't very clear on what I wanted to do, but I was quite clear that I wanted to move on. So when that sort of, your time is up message was delivered, it was, it definitely still felt very weird. And to be honest, at that point in time, a little bit scary, because, what I was thinking about was, I think for a lot of people in corporations for a long period of time, you get convinced, I think, that there is somehow you become so specialized in what you're doing that no one else will employ you, or your skills are very specific to that company, and you've kind of gone past your sell-by date, and you'll just be scrabbling around for things that are not very inspiring elsewhere. And so that was, that was definitely part of my mindset at the time, because I think large corporates in general, not because they mean to, a little bit like your parents and that poem.
Yes.
But they kind of turn you, if you're not careful, into a bit of an infant, into a bit of a child, because you become you're taught to seek approval through performance reviews and things in a very specific way from people who perhaps don't really understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. You get passed from manager to manager, and you have to seek their approval, and that's what determines whether you're deemed to be successful or not. And it's like being in school or being with some sort of pushy parents, and it stops you, I think, eventually believing in yourself enough or having enough self-esteem that you lose confidence, I think. You gain confidence, I think, within the organization.
Yes.
But you lose confidence elsewhere.
I totally see that. And it's fascinating that, you were a pretty senior level when you left BP, and yet you're recognizing that. So your confidence is high within the organization. It's very well defined. Everybody knows what you do. Your whole identity is kind of wrapped up in that. But outside, there's a risk that may not be valued in the same way. And the fear of that playing out is enough sometimes to keep you in a job that may not be making you as happy as it once did.
There's something about human psychology that prefers to hang on to what you've got than take a risk on something new. And I think there's a word for that, but I forgot what it is. But you know what I mean. It's sort of like you.
So you got the note, and you've explained a bit about how you felt. What did you do next, and how did you plan for that? Did you just draw it immediately on what you'd done before? In other words, right, I'll go and get another job and I'll go and speak to headhunters, or did you think, actually, this could be an opportunity and I might do something different now?
It was actually a bit of both, and actually, I effectively moved out of the job very quickly. Within 2 or 3 weeks, I was on gardening leave, which gave me a couple of months before BP stopped paying me to actually think a lot, talk to people, and figure out what I wanted to do next. And I think I had a combination of reactions. I had a reaction which was kind of like, oh crap, I need to find another job because the money is going to run out, sort of thing. And what that meant was I started talking to a lot of headhunters very quickly, and just the more you talk to headhunters, the more they introduce you to other headhunters, and so it goes on. I was probably ending up having like 1 or 2 conversations every other day with a headhunter. But I think on reflection, I probably leapt into that process far too quickly, because what I was talking to those headhunters about were sort of continuations of what I'd already been doing, sort of going and running another sort of scale up or venture building factory in another corporate, or maybe being a chief commercial officer of a startup or a CEO of a small company in the energy space. And whilst those things weren't necessarily bad things, I hadn't even thought through some of the dimensions which I think on reflection are quite important, like do I still want a full-time job? Do I want to work for another corporation? Do I want to work for a much smaller company? Do I want to set something up by myself? Do I want to be a consultant, or do I want to, do something else? These sort of dimensions I hadn't even thought through. I just went straight into talking to headhunters to see what was out there, because I thought, I need to get a head start on this. And actually, and then I had November, December on gardening, and then there was Christmas, and that sort of period when everything stopped, and I just had a chance to sit down with my partner and talk to her about what I doing. And in those conversations, what became really apparent was something that I'd been doing as a hobby for a very long time kept surfacing in the conversation, and this was
Interesting.
and this was making pottery.
Yeah.
So I got very serious with it as a hobby, and and I got a kiln and a wheel at home, but in the conversations that I was having, that kept surfacing, and it was actually the coach that I spoke to that said to me something along the lines of, "At what point are you going to give yourself permission to pursue?"
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it?
In other words,
Suppressing it is just a hobby. It's just a hobby.
yeah. But in other words, it's like it's me preventing myself from allowing myself to think that might be a valid thing to do. I also think I felt like there was something a bit midlife crisis and cheesy about turning a hobby into a mini business. It's like, there's something which felt almost cliched about it.
I mean, it's cheaper than buying a Ferrari, I suppose, isn't it? Just like buying a kiln and.
I don't know. Kilns are very expensive, but not that expensive. I grant.
And what sort of reaction did you get when you said it? Oh, Steve.
People just thought it was enormously cool and fun.
Yeah,
I think people were very encouraging. I think what's funny is like some of my friends and my parents are a bit like, "So have you sold anything? Yeah, how are you selling? Is that sort of, are you actually making any money?" And the answer's like, no, not really. But I think there's a point about being a creative or being an artist, which is just about the confidence to put yourself out there in the world and see what happens.
And you've stepped out. I mean, you haven't just stayed in your studio. You've gone out and showcased what you've done at places in London, I know as well, and got yourself in magazines and things. So, I mean, this isn't just a personal project, isn't it? It's something you want to take to market.
Exactly. And so, there are now, I think, 4 galleries that are going to stock my work, which is
brilliant.
Cool. But it's like I say, it's never going to make me a fortune, but that's not really the point. It's about sort of pursuing a thread of creativity and making things. I like making things. So, that I think was something that was nascent. There was an itch that I wanted to scratch that I didn't even realize I wanted to scratch, and also scratching it in a hobby way. And then the other thing I think that I started to get clear on with that in mind was, therefore, I can't do a full-time job in a more commercial.
Yeah. So actually, it created a constraint for you where, okay, therefore I can't do this because this has actually become that important to me.
Yeah, and so, but I also knew that I still wanted to keep engaged with the cleantech sort of ecosystem, and particularly with startups and scale-ups in that space, because that was the most fun I'd had, I think, in my career. And I didn't want to lose the connection to all of that expertise in the energy industry that I'd built up. So that then kind of took me to a place which sort of said, okay, well, notionally then I want to spend half of my time doing pottery and half of my time somehow engaging with or being part of the clean tech ecosystem and startup scale-up world. So I got to that point probably around Christmas time.
So what have you done then? So what kind of things are you doing now to fill that other part of your week?
Yeah, so because I'd got some experience sitting on the board of various startups in the later years of my career at BP, and I found that interesting and engaging, and wanted to do more of that. So I actually found my way onto a platform which specializes in recruiting for board roles called New Role, and they have a very nicely curated set of stuff. They do kind of trusteeships for charities and non-profits, as well as school boards, but also commercial startup and small company boards. And so I literally found a couple that I thought were really, really interesting and fitted with what I thought I wanted to do on that, applied for them, and ended up being offered and taking both of those. So that was the sort of first thing I did was, ended up taking on the chair of a board role for a small UK startup company specializing in AI for manufacturing optimization. It's called Luffy, and it's only 12 people, right? So it's a very hands-on chair role. But so that was the first thing. I literally this month just joining the board of a second startup which came through that process, doing energy optimization, and then the third thing. And this is the importance of networks, and you never know where opportunities might come from, and therefore spending a lot of time talking to people who aren't necessarily professionals in recruitment or headhunters, but just people in your network who know other people. And so I was introduced to a European growth fund called Verdane via a senior partner at a well-known consultancy that I'd been working with at BP. Who had nothing to do with private equity or growth funds in their job. They just happened to know a senior person at Verdane. I got introduced, got into conversation, happened to catch them, I think, at a point where they were expanding into a decarbonization fund, had an interest in working with people with, deep energy industry experience. And so, I had a great first conversation, and then it went quiet for 2 months. And I thought, well, that's another conversation that's kind of gone dead. But then they sort of popped up a couple of months later and said, hey, I think we've got something that we're working on that might be interesting to you and where we value your expertise. And it was a lot like the rest of my career. I started off doing a project, sort of a time-bounded 4 or 5 month project with them on a particular investment. And through that process, they got to know me, I got to know them. I like them a lot. They're one of the sort of few funds in Europe or in the world that are registered as a B Corp, so they're very purposeful. And they're investing in exactly in the areas which I think are interesting from the point of view of energy transition. And so, now I've been offered and taken up a senior advisor role with them, which is approximately half my time.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things that I find really interesting here, though, particularly is on the board side of things, is how you were instantly credible outside applying for boards because of the experience you'd got at BP. And there are lots of examples of things like that where we're walking away with these like proof points in our capability. And of course, it doesn't help that the brand is household name, whatever you think of it, there's going to be a kind of quality mark to anybody coming out of that. So those sorts of capabilities that you can almost flip into something else and they're instantly valuable outside. Are there other things like that you think of that you did?
Right. And I think that's the realization. And you only kind of get that perspective once you've left, and then you start telling it to other people, and you're like it's like you're somebody who's just quit smoking, telling people who are still, it's all distorted. And so, it's only when you've left that you get the perspective to see actually, for somebody who's had a reasonably long and successful career in a large corporate, you bring with you a whole bunch of stuff that you just don't even, I think, realize you have. The ability to organize and manage projects in many cases, the ability to run a team, to hire people, to build those teams, to build capability in people, to be able to think a little bit strategically and communicate your ideas in an effective way.
I think the other thing is, though, some of those companies you're working with, they wouldn't want you full time with them. They actually just need a little bit of you. you would sit around, you probably wouldn't last because either you annoy people because you'd be trying to bring something to it that they haven't got space or capacity for, or you would just get bored of it. Yeah. So it works both ways. They need just a bit of you to help solve some problems that they've got, and then you walk away and you just get to, I assume, get rewarded for just doing a little bit of time, but it's super valuable what you've been able to do. So you get your time back. And it just feels like such a nice relationship where both sides gain some. One of the things I'm interested in is how you describe yourself when you're meeting people now. So before it was probably easy, just like me, we just said, I work at BP. It tended to be enough. It stopped most further questions, to be honest. But it becomes more hard when you haven't got that kind of like clear badge that you're carrying. So how do you do that?
I think that's a really interesting question. It's also I'm finding it really hard to do it in a way that is like, it doesn't take 5 minutes, and people you meet for the first time to sort of start edging away from you just out of sheer boredom there's no will. I mean, on the one hand, you say, well, I've got a portfolio career. What? And people going like, well,
that's a conversation stopper.
Yeah. What is it? So I mean, I at the moment I've gone for a very literal description, which is like I spend half of my time being making ceramics and being potter, and half of my time working startups in the energy transition. And that's kind of what I say. Or maybe don't use the word energy transition because that's a bit of jargon, but that's kind of what I say, which is very factual, but it's not like a
one-liner. Yeah. But you lead with the potter. Then.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who I'm talking to a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes lead with the potter. And so I think that I just, it's quite a short way of saying it, but it also enables people then to dive into the things that
What would you have told yourself, like now looking back, what would you have told yourself maybe that day when you got that note a bit out of the blue, that would have reassured you that this would all actually have worked out really well and maybe be much, much better than you expected?
I mean, part of it is just the just do it type mentality. Just go out there and find what you're passionate about and do it. I mean, that sounds like something on a NAF inspirational poster, but I think it's something more subtle than that, though, which is that it's almost like trust your relationships is what I would say. And by that, I mean, have conversations with a lot of people, and I don't think you quite realize how interconnected everybody's networks are. And it's like, it doesn't take long to reach Kevin Bacon if that's what you're interested in, or, for Kevin Bacon, substitute your next job. And it's that kind of, the world is pretty interconnected, and, go and find the people who have an interest in you, have taken an interest in you and your career in the past, know you, and would like to help. And through those interconnections will come a bunch of interesting conversations. Is kind of what I would tell myself, is that you don't have to go necessarily to headhunters to do it, but yeah, you build up a lot of networks and relationships and contacts as in a corporate career. And there's a web there, a very valuable web of connections that actually will generate a bunch of interesting stuff that if you just follow it, you're not quite sure where it's going to lead, but have the confidence and the faith to follow those conversations. And through that, is what I would tell myself, is opportunities will come that will be interesting.
Great. Fantastic. Good advice as well for other people, I think, hopefully too, that have those sort of networks. But also, work, if you're in the company now and you're not planning to leave for a bit, work on those networks. Don't just rely on LinkedIn to do it all for you. You've got to be doing some work now to get prepared.
Super valuable. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. Really appreciate your time this morning. Great insights there for other people.
Great to talk to you, Adam, as always.
Good. I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Right.
Cheers. Right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast with Steve Cook and gained a lot from the experience of listening to his journey and built some confidence too that what's possible for him, it could be entirely possible for you too. The next podcast is going to be with Katie Tucker. She started her career in journalism and now is the author of a book, Do Penguins Eat Peaches? It's all about getting to know your customer better. So she's got a fascinating journey of how she's moved out of corporate life into becoming a writer and building a consultancy and a business around the book. So I hope you'll join us for the next podcast. Press the subscribe button and you should automatically get access to it. Bye now.